It's that time. Post Super Bowl off season is here for all 32 teams. We're opening up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag this week. Who's the next Baker Mayfield? Joe Flacco's future at quarterback in the NFL. And we're taking a look at Steve Wilks fired, Steve Spagnuolo extended from that Super Bowl matchup, and a whole lot more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all of the everydayers. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. We really appreciate it. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first ticket purchase. We've got a lot of football to talk about. Sometimes real life and football collide, and there's certain stories, Matt, that you don't want to cover and speak about, but you have to. And never should any day, any parade, or a Super Bowl parade end in what we saw with what happened in Kansas City with the Chiefs parade and the shootings. And it's really just unbelievable that it continues to happen and nobody does anything about it.
Yeah, I almost didn't want to talk about it because I don't feel qualified to talk about it, just because we host a football podcast and this happened at a football event. It doesn't make me know anything about it. You know, it's almost like me talking about, math or science or something that's totally not in my realm.
And we both know you know nothing about those.
And I know nothing about those. I know nothing about anything that's non-football related. My friends even laugh at me. My family just call it Matt's world. I just live in this bubble of football, and I don't pay attention to politics. I don't pay attention to any of that kind of stuff. So I don't know how the world works like most people do, to be honest with you. And it's a strength and a weakness, and it makes it really hard for me to comment on this. But, I kind of thought about it before we hit record. My kids are both in high school, and they understand these things now. They've been around the block a little bit, and I'm sitting there thinking through your eyes, like, what if your son asks you, who's much younger, Daddy, why would somebody do this? I don't know how you handle that as a parent, as anything,
Yeah, doing drills. My son's in kindergarten. They've done drills about if something happens like this, and it doesn't really comprehend, I think, exactly how serious something like this could be. And obviously, once you become a parent, it really changes your outlook on things like that when you have kids. And there were kids involved with this shooting. And when I was a kid, living in California, it was like, oh, there might be an earthquake. You just hide under your desk if there's an earthquake.
Right.
Earthquake never really came, and when an earthquake comes, it just barely shakes a little bit. You're like, oh, that was an earthquake. All right, but but this is serious. We're talking about lives here, and honestly, you're blessed, Matt, for not paying attention to politics. And it's just this is the thing: is it doesn't matter what side you're on politically. You don't want people getting shot and killed, so you got to come together and do something. And it starts with that level of, no, let's have a divisive argument about it. There's no argument. Figure something out. Figure it out, people. Or we'll get someone else in that does.
Yeah, 100%. And unfortunately, it was at a sports event, a football event. It should be a glorious Chiefs parade, and I'm sure all those kids took the day off school, and the day's obviously ruined.
Cool a young kid that's a Chiefs fan goes to a parade to celebrate this amazing thing, and so fun. It's a life memory, and you get shot. I mean, come on.
Or even you're just there while bullets are flying. That's going to scar you no matter what. It's horrendous. I hope we never have to talk about it again, but I bet we will.
Do something. We've got to transition here into some football conversation. Yeah. And speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, to the victor goes the spoils here as far as, what we're seeing. One defensive coordinator from the Super Bowl gets an extension, and the other one got fired, Matt. And Steve Spagnuolo, well-deserved. I mean, how great is the Kansas City Chiefs situation with their organization to have a great head coach, to have the best quarterback in the NFL, have one of, if not the best defensive coordinator in the NFL who has no plans to leave. I mean, they're in the ultimate situation to continue to win for as long as they decide they want to win, right? Until someone knocks them off that perch, and nobody's been able to do it. And Steve Spagnuolo was, to me, if we're rating heroes of the game, and I've said this multiple times, and Andy Reid's going to get a lot of credit, and he should, and Patrick Mahomes gets a lot of credit, and he should. If I'm listing out who the most important factors were in the Super Bowl, Steve Spagnuolo was number one on the list.
Yeah, like hockey, at the end of hockey games, they give out 3 stars. Like, I think he's the number 1 star for me, and maybe Chris Jones had been number 2. Like, I know he wasn't going to win the MVP, but you remember that was my long shot, Bosa and Jones. They both were awesome in this game, but it's going to go to Mahomes. But a lot of that was Spagnuolo freeing him up, and all the man coverage they did, and making people uncomfortable. And I don't think any of us are going to say, boy, why would you extend him, or he shouldn't have got a raise. Of course he should got a raise. Whatever they gave him is probably not enough. I mean, he's worth every cent and more. But I'm happy for him, because I think people in the know have considered him one of the best coordinators on either side of the ball, but especially defensive, obviously, in the 2000s, if not longer, the Super Bowl era, really. And this year, I think a lot more eyes were opened, because it wasn't just Mahomes putting up 40 points in shootout after shootout. I mean, he got more credit that he has deserved forever.
Steve Wilks, scapegoat?
Does it shock you?
No. It's funny because Kroc and I on Locked On 49ers had done a podcast predicting that Wilks was going to get fired, and the writing was kind of on the wall, and we laid out why, and we stopped recording, and the news came that he got fired. And so it was one of those things where, and Kyle Shanahan talked about it. He said, we got the right man, and that's what we were looking for. He's a leader of men, but the X's and O's was never going to work. And that's what we had kind of talked about. And essentially it became, look, honestly, Kyle Shanahan's wearing too many hats. And we kind of saw it with the game management stuff, with the overtime, and like, he's the head coach, he's the offensive coordinator and play caller, and he's the quasi defense coordinator as well. Because when Steve Wilks came in, Steve Wilks didn't run Steve Wilks' defense. He ran Kyle Shanahan's defense. He ran the same defense that's been cultivated there in the lab with Shanahan and Robert Saleh, and DeMeco Ryans was there the whole time. That's why that was seamless. And then Ryans kind of, continued to tweak the scheme. And then you bring someone in from the outside and say, hey, cool, you're our defense coordinator, but guess what? You got to run this scheme. You don't get to run your own scheme. And I think that was a big problem, and that was a mistake from the start. And I think that's why, in the end, a change had to be made. So Kyle Shanahan's got to figure out right now, okay, well, do you promote from within again, like you did with DeMeco Ryans, with someone who's been in the lab and knows what you're trying to do and jives with your personnel, or do you go outside the building? And you have to let, people keep bringing up Mike Vrabel. You think Mike Vrabel's going to come in and run somebody else's defense? No.
Get yelled at by Shanahan?
Yeah. He's not
going to get Belichick.
Right.
Yeah.
And if those guys come in, guess what? That's a completely different scheme and different personnel. So that's a bigger project to try to implement. So they got to figure that out. And maybe Kyle Shanahan needs to loosen up his grip a little bit on some things, and allow some help and allow some other people to do some things on the defensive side of the ball to free him up to focus on other things, and even some game management, which clearly I think he needs to get a little bit better at. So yeah, I don't know who the defense coordinator is going to be. I would guess it's somebody much more closer to, either someone who was there that's now on Saleh or DeMeco's staff, or someone who was just one of the assistants the last few years that just jumps into the DC role.
I can't see wholesale changes. We're going to be a nickel only team. We're going to go strict 3-4. I mean, you might as well run it back with what you got. It's been working quite well.
How about go hire Spagnuolo's number 2?
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know who that is. Who's the number 2 under Steve Spagnuolo? Who'd be the next man up for them? Go hire that guy.
I don't know who it is, but I do listen to DJ and Bucky's podcast quite a bit. And Bucky is good friends with the secondary coach there. who's been there a long time and is doing a bang-up job. That's all I know. So maybe he's a name to know, whoever he is.
I'm on board with the DBs, the way they've played,
The way they
how
develop,
well they're coached, and how well they've been developed. Multiple times in a row, turning later round picks, day 3 picks, into big time.
Sneed's one of the best corners in the league.
Darius Ward was drafted even later than Sneed before him, who's now a 49. So,
and even some names no one talks about. We're not even talking about McDuffie and Sneed, but like all those dudes. I mean, they all contribute and pllayed press man coverage against Debo and Ayuk. I mean, like, come on, man.
Absolutely. You know, McDuffie was a higher pick, but great pick, great development there. Brian Cook wasn't a high pick either as a safety. So yeah, I would be totally on board with that one. Next, Matt, let's talk about Jim Harbaugh and his plan for the offense with the Los Angeles Chargers. We know what that coaching staff is looking like now. And what's Flacco's future as comeback player of the year? Can he stay on top, or does he go back to wherever it was he came from before he came back? And who's the next Baker Mayfield, who could be a huge impact on a short-term deal for an NFL team in 2024? Next. The next segment here on Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get you down, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. You cannot, and I cannot stress this enough, do not let that little thing, that small thing, become the big thing in your life. That's why you have to talk it through, and always better to talk it through with someone who's unbiased in your life. So it really helps you in therapy, to identify some of those things that allow you to be authentically upset, sad, or excited in your life, right? And you go through the process of learning tools to help you help yourself. And sometimes you just need that weekly check-in. And therapy can be different for everyone. And most of us have much bigger problems than our favorite sports team. But I think some people let sports, to be honest with you, fester a little bit too much, and it does affect the rest of their lives. So get all that stuff out. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online, designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Jim Harbaugh. We've had multiple questions on Jim Harbaugh in the Chargers offense. We got a couple of them from Paul here. Says, are we sure the Chargers are going to draft a wide receiver or Bowers in the first round? Why not offensive line, given Harbaugh's propensity to run the football? And a secondary question I've seen a lot is, if you're in those dynasty football leagues, Matt, should you maybe trade away Justin Herbert, as good as he is? Because while wins and losses might potentially be better in LA with the Chargers, just looking at Harbaugh's history, it might not be a juggernaut passing game fantasy offense for the quarterback. You know,
I think the second question, I think the answer is yes. You know, and I adore Herbert. You know, like if I was buying stock in the real world, I'd be buying Herbert stock, because I think he's got a better chance now to go to the playoffs, you know, be a successful winning quarterback, maybe even win a Super Bowl someday with a running game, a solid coach, etc. But if all I care about is stats, I think it's not that he has to go, but there's so many young quarterbacks in the fantasy world now. If you could pivot to a younger guy or whatever, I would be all ears on that. As
you
the
had
original question,
you had Malik Neighbors, correct? Going number 5.
I did.
Chargers in your mock draft earlier on this week, and go check it out. You can hear what Matt's selections were for all 32 teams in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft. And it could come down to that conversation that is laid out here by Paul. Malik Neighbors, if he's the top wide receiver on the board for you, whoever that top wide receiver might be, you got Brock Bowers at tight end, and you got maybe Joe Alt, the best offensive tackle in the draft.
Yeah, and by no means do I think it's a slam dunk. It's a pass catcher. So Alt looks like a tremendous prospect. You already have Slater on the left side. You drafted Zion Johnson high. He would basically complete your line to do exactly what Harbaugh wants, and that does sound like that's his personality, that's his DNA. So I think that's absolutely at play. But I do think it's noteworthy that they are in cap hell, first of all. So they're going to have a hard time retaining or adding from outside the organization. The starting tight end, Gerald Everett, is a free agent. Williams and Allen are unbelievably high cap hits. And from what I understand, Harbaugh was asked about it in his press conference, and he kind of ignored Williams, but he kept bringing up Allen in a positive light. So just kind of insinuating that if one of the two is going to go, it's probably Williams.
Yeah.
And this is why Quentin Johnston was drafted in the first round, but I don't know that you can count on him. So they're both big needs, and I could see either for sure. And after reading this question, I immediately thought, well, if you could, it's not like they're devoid of needs. If they could go from 5 to 8 or 9 and pick up a second rounder and get both, then, just take whatever falls to you. Now you're talking,
I totally agree. And I was about to say the same thing. I would put money on the field if we're talking about those specific players, just because it might be the best thing for them to do, to move around to where, say, a defensive end is the best player on the board for you a little bit later, collect more picks to try to build that thing. And just with the way that Harbaugh has run his teams in the past, I don't think it's necessarily that he won't draft a wide receiver. And he, to be honest with you, the real answer is who's the best player. I don't care.
Yeah.
Drafting for needs just the wrong way to look at it, because what your need is right now is not going to be your need next year and the year after. You're trying to build this thing long term anyway. And how often do rookies impact more their rookie year than the rest of their career anyway? So draft the best player. If Alt's way ahead of the other receivers, you draft Alt, period. I don't care. If you have another good tackle on your team, have a second good tackle, right? Most teams don't have one, or a lot of teams don't have one.
Sure.
So that best player is answer one, and listen to trade down offers and potentially get yourself an end, because Bosa and Mack, Khalil Mack, one of them's going to be gone. Maybe they're both gone, right? And I would say up front on both sides of the ball is probably where Harbaugh would prefer to go. And they're going to be running the football a lot. And if you're just a skinny, fast wide receiver, doesn't like to block, isn't a
that's
football player, probably not going to fit in well with the culture for Jim Harbaugh. And I'm not saying that Malik Neighbors is that, but he is fast and skinny, but if he's a dog, then Harbaugh will love him. So that I think that's trade down, A, best player, B. And who's that best player? That's a good question that you guys can fight about. Is it Neighbors? Is it the tight end Brock Bowers? Is it Joe Alt? But I think they're going to get offers at 5.
I would think so. I mean, they probably would love for Daniels to start slipping a little bit. One of the quarterbacks to get all the way down to 5 would be ideal for them to start fielding offers. But you've brought this up several times. It's the Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell conversation too. That I think it starts with the Chargers, assuming all teams sit where they are. Do we want the pass catcher or do we want the tackle? And then the Giants go, do we want the pass catcher or do we want the tackle? And then the Titans go, do we want the pass catcher or the tackle? Which might be decided for them by that.
So it'll be decided for the Titans most likely. Yeah. And to be honest with you, it's probably more like, I don't know. So Malik Neighbors, I mean, I put on some of his film recently. Dude's electric. He's dynamic for sure.
He's really good.
I don't know if he's Jamar Chase. Is he more Waddle? So if are we talking, is it less Chase versus Sewell, or are we talking Sewell versus Waddle, or is he kind of in the middle of those two as a prospect? And like both those guys went within a few picks of each other, right? But Chase was clearly the number one.
He might be right in the middle,
right? So that might make it easier to say, well, we're going Alt, right? And if it wasn't specifically Jamar Chase, would the Bengals have gone with Sewell rather than a wide receiver? Because I think they drafted Jamar Chase. They didn't draft a receiver over a tackle.
I mean, people were talking about Chase when he came out. People might forget, because him and Sewell also didn't play that year because of COVID. They were beating up on people as 18-year-olds, which was bonkers. But the draft next, we're talking about Chase being the best receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson. He was, and now Marvin's even a better prospect maybe than both. But, he was considered a transcendent receiver prospect. Or these guys are, Rome as well. Rome and Neighbors, 9 out of 10 years are probably the first receiver off the board and are probably top 6 picks any year they come out, give or take. But I don't think they're Calvin Johnson. They're a transcendent, blow your doors off, best prospect I've ever seen guy. And
I'll say for the Chargers, Rome Odunze, few too many similarities maybe with Quentin Johnston. So I don't love the fit with him.
I want the more electric guy, the deep ball guy.
I'd put him clearly behind like Bowers and the rest of them. But I love Bowers to the Chargers as well.
But if you move from 5 to 8 and you end up with Rome, cool. If you got a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, right.
And Bowers could be there still. if after a trade down as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Real quick on that too is when you have all these cap issues, throwing a couple 4th-round picks for cheap labor for the next 4 years goes a long way. You know, a starting safety, a starting guard, you know, things that aren't, you know, that you're spending big money on. A 3rd-round receiver as your number 3 receiver, as a slot guy or something. Like, that stuff's valuable to teams like that to build a middle class.
Last thing, quick reminder, last year, Joe Alt's a better prospect, I would say, right now in February. We'll see what it looks like in April. I would say Joe Alt's probably a better prospect than Johnson was last year.
Yeah, I agree.
And they traded up to get Johnson last year. The Cardinals did.
Right.
So, yeah, around that
then
same
the Steelers traded up for Jones right after. You know, I mean, tackles are hard. It's a rare tackle class because the good ones are great, and there might be one in the 2nd round, which never happens. You know.
Yeah. But you're kind of coin flipping on the other guys because there's a lot of raw, there's a lot of weird. Could go great, could go not, could be maybe he's a guard. But the top guys, they're going to be gone in the top 10 and maybe the top 7. So you've got to get on them early if you think there's a difference in those guys. So we could see some move up for some people trading up for that. And look, the Cardinals moved up for Johnson, even with Skoronski available for him where they sat. And they saw the need to go up and get the guy who's the true, legit, day one offensive starting tackle.
Yeah, I mocked Alt to the Titans. I think that's like his floor. I mean, they would just run the post. Yeah.
Right. And because the receivers will be gone by then. So it'll work.
There's not a choice.
Yeah. And so if you want Joe Alt, you got to get up in front of 7, basically. Next, let's talk quarterbacks. Joe Flacco, what's his future in the NFL? And who's the next Baker Mayfield in the NFL? This episode is brought to you in part by Game Time. And when you're trying to buy tickets to your next big event, it shouldn't be a hassle. You shouldn't have to worry about it. And you should be excited. And you should be excited when you're using Game Time to find fast, easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, theater events near you. Killer last-minute deals at Game Time, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Love Game Time. You decide, hey, I'm gonna go see the ball game tonight. I've done it before. The San Francisco Giants baseball games, right across the bridge. I get there in no time. I'm gonna go catch the ball game tonight. You go on Game Time. You get the last minute deals on those tickets. You see the view from your seat. You know exactly what's going to look like when you arrive. And all in prices, my favorite part, shows the total up front, so you know what you're getting, and you know you're getting that great deal before you check out. And you don't have those hidden fees heaped on you at the very end. Couple taps. Buy those tickets. They're right on the app. You don't have to go fishing through email. And Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after an event starts. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, I think you've got the question in front of you on this one, Matt.
Yeah, I do.
With Joe Flacco, and it's a fascinating one because he was comeback player of the year, played pretty stinking good. There's a lot of teams out there that could have used Flacco-level quarterback play for their team to maybe get them into the playoffs like the Browns did.
Yeah, and I'll read both these questions because they're both quarterback related. We both we teased them a little bit too. Our buddy JDS basically just asked, could Flacco open a season as a starter, and if so, where? And then Michael Bradley writes to me directly, and looks like he's a Pirate fan, poor guy. Will any of this year's free agent quarterbacks take a Baker Mayfield-like contract to quarterback a team with a lot of potential, like the Bucs, Steelers, Vikings, etc.? So I think these are really interesting. And everyone knows I root for Flacco, but my concerns with him are his age, his ability to hold up for more than 3, 4, 5 games, and his style of play. He took a beating, I mean, like he wasn't quick to get the ball out. He didn't, shrivel up in the pocket. He took a lot of hits, and it didn't show until the playoffs, but he also put the ball in harm's way a lot. He got away with it a little bit more. So I thought his numbers were a little inflated, but if he wants to play again, I don't think he can be an opening day start. Well, I think he could be a placeholder for a highly drafted dude. The Raiders go with Flacco and Penix or something like that. Yeah. So, I could see that, but I can't see a team saying, Joe, you're our starter. I think he's more the big brother, mentor, placeholder type guy. You agree on that with Flacco?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fit, because he's a very old school style of quarterback,
Right.
Passer and, big armed guy. And that's kind of what he always was. And you look at the draft and how many of those guys are even in the draft. So even if you're using him as a veteran stopgap starter, where's the offensive fit where you go seamlessly from Flacco to Jaden Daniels? That doesn't make any sense, right? So,
no, right.
Two different stylistically, and maybe that doesn't matter to some teams. And but
you just want the influence. And all
I don't know how
yeah.
much Flacco wants to do that again, because he already did it with the Jets, and I don't think he feels great about his time with the Jets. And the Jets could have used Flacco.
He didn't love doing it for Lamar.
Yeah, he hated it for Lamar, because that was the end.
right.
And that was the end of him being, the elite. Is Joe Flacco elite? People stopped asking the question once Lamar took over with the Ravens. So, but he's the perfect, veteran stopgap player. Does he want to play that role? It seems like he still wants to play in the NFL. He jumped off the couch to go play with the Browns last year. So, and who knows?
Or he waits around for an injury again.
And I'll say this. Are we sure he's still not the Browns' best quarterback? So maybe it's not week 1 starter. Maybe it's week 10 starter again for the Browns.
Yeah, and I saw a blurb today. I don't know how much credence I put in it, but Flacco unlikely to return to Cleveland. I mean, which makes sense. They have a lot of money tied up in one guy, and it's hard to coach a team when the team's looking around going, the guy we're not paying half as much is better. It could be a distraction. But you start looking at the quarterback musical chairs. There's not as many chairs as you think. I'm not sure Russell Wilson gets a starting job. I don't think a Tannehill probably is going to get a starting job. When all the rookies settle in, maybe they're not week 1 starters, but they're going to start soon. And Fields gets traded and Cousins settles down and Baker settles down. I don't know if there's a lot of room left for the Flaccos and Wilsons and Tannehills of the world.
There's not.
There isn't. No.
I've got a guy that could be the next Baker if somebody is. What about
I got 2 names.
What about Sam Darnold?
Yeah, he's one of my 2. So I looked at that question as a highly drafted, player that has fizzled out or not lived up to expectations.
Yeah, a rebound.
And
a rebound.
Yes. And Trubisky and Mariota were no. I think their book is written. I think they are busts officially. I mean, they're not that these other guys are stars. But Darnold, and I can't quit Jameis Winston. Darnold and Winston, to me, have a chance to have a Geno. If I was to bet on who's a Geno-like type of dude, or Baker in this situation, I would still hold a little bit of a candle for those 2.
And
I mean, Darnold's 24.
Oh, Darnold's still really young, and both those guys have great arms still, and are in their prime as far as what they could be as an NFL quarterback. And both are younger than Geno was when he became Seattle Geno, right? And Jameis Winston too is everyone loves him. People love being around. People love having him on the team. He's a little weird, but I think that's.
I don't know. He's not their best quarterback either.
What's that?
He might be their best quarterback in New Orleans.
Well, that's true. That's true. They're bringing in Clint Kubiak now officially since the Super Bowl's over. He was the lieutenant under Shanahan there, passing game coordinator. So that's probably not a great fit for Jameis Winston, and that's kind of thing again. So Flacco, Winston, what's the team that's a great fit for, even from a stopgap, from what their skill set is, the offenses they've played in, for some of those young quarterbacks that have been drafted? I think Darnold's got a little better path of, okay, you're the stopgap. And Darnold's signed a 1-year deal with the Niners, to work under Shanahan there for a year. He's clearly not going to play over Purdy. So he's probably looking for that deal exactly like what Trubisky got in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, where it's okay, give me 1 week to prove I'm the starter, and then bring the other guy in if I'm bad. That's the best he can probably hope for. And
100%.
Still got some talent though.
And then there's even the Minshews and Mason Rudolphs that are probably not going to get a starting gig, but at least did some good things last year. They don't have high ceilings, they're Tyrod Taylor,
And a lot of it is, can you pick the spot where the guy who is the starter gets hurt?
Right.
Can you? I look at someone like, and we got this question about Anthony Richardson, which I think was super interesting too. And I think about Trey Lance, and Anthony Richardson is 1 game away from being what Trey Lance was. Think about that.
Right.
What if Anthony Richardson breaks his ankle in week 2?
And how many games he's finished his career? None.
He's 3rd string somewhere else. And what if Lance went to the Jets where he would through everything that happened there, through attrition, had a chance to play. He didn't have a chance to do anything with the Cowboys because nobody was going to play over Dak Prescott, and he didn't get hurt. So, a lot of it is luck. Where do you end up?
Yeah.
Like Geno Smith luckily ended up in a place where the guy got traded in front of him and he beat out Drew Lock, but it wasn't a guarantee that Drew Lock was going to get beat out by him. And so maybe he would have never had that opportunity. And so Brock Purdy would have never had that opportunity if Lance and Jimmy G didn't get hurt. So there's a lot of luck involved. Can you go somewhere where can you like see the future? Like, where's the place where the incumbent starter might get hurt and I'd have a chance to play?
It's so important at that position in particular. I mean, 999 times out of 1,000, Kurt Warner does not get a chance, with the Rams. And in terms of, just never get a chance,
Oh my gosh. Did you hear the story? And we got to go, but did you hear the story that Ed McCaffrey told during Senior Bowl week about his time on the Broncos and Terrell Davis, Hall of Fame running back, 2,000-yard running back for those championship Denver Broncos teams? Well, before that, he was seventh rounder undrafted.
Late pick, He wasn't even a starter at Georgia, I don't think.
Yeah, and he went military first, so he's an older prospect too. And he was in camp as a rookie and like the sixth running back on the depth chart, wasn't getting any reps, and he's about ready to quit. And they had this exhibition game in Japan that year. It was 49ers against the Broncos in Japan. And he's like, what am I doing in Japan? He wanted to quit the team before that exhibition, that preseason game. But he didn't know Japanese. If he had a
translator handy, he would have done it.
He left to go to the airport. He couldn't get there because he couldn't find his way around because he didn't speak the language. He would have never had his career. Would have never happened. But instead, he's pissed off and he goes down there as a gunner, which was like the big moment in his career. He went down on the gunner and crushed the return man on the opening kickoff of the game. Kind of turned a couple heads with the team. There were some injuries which were needed, a bunch of injuries in front of him. He got an opportunity and he became TD.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, I think it's certainly magnified a quarterback because you need so many reps in practice. Like you're that third string guy just kind of holding a clipboard. Like I can't even get a snap in practice, but I'm sure there's 1,000. I'm not 1,000, but there's many would have been Kurt Warners had they got a chance, would have been quite good, but they just didn't get a chance.
What's Brady's career? If Drew Bledsoe doesn't get
right. Brady, Purdy. I mean, some of these late picks,
Yeah. Brady's somewhere else as a backup for a long time. Bledsoe wins 4 Super Bowls, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's not that hard to write that history.
Yeah. All right. Fascinating stuff. It's all chaos. Let's be good to each other. Appreciate all the listeners out there. Appreciate all the questions. Apologies to the ones we did not get to. You can drop them anytime to us on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or in the YouTube comments. And Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.